I constantly get surprised by what we import and export from New Zealand. Saying it's just an exciting time, I think, to be a Kiwi, because I think the marketplace has really opened up. You know, don't underplay that, but make sure you lean into the knowledge and advice. Don't be scared to ask a question. I'm Richard Davies. I started HGL up 8.5 years ago. I was a general manager in the UK for a large independent freight forwarder, and thought it was a transferable skill set to New Zealand, and thought we could possibly make a little bit of a difference. We're already dealing with New Zealand partners as well. And really that's how the germ of it all started. And then I moved to New Zealand and I realised that it wasn't a transferable skill set, and I had to kind of relearn everything again from scratch, which is kind of pertinent really to this whole conversation.
Yeah. So I suppose, that's one of the biggest things is obviously there's the logistical challenge of distance, for New Zealand. But what are some of those other logistical challenges that New Zealand exporters face from here?
I suppose that going back, touching to what I said originally, one of the biggest challenges for me when I came here, and in that sense, it does make sense, is understanding that even though there might be English in a different country, it's not quite English. Everything's slightly out of sync. So when I came,
you mean our terminology?
Yeah, just terminology between different worlds is slightly different. So when I first came here, and I know we're talking about exports, but this is just to give an example of the differentials. So when we first came here, someone said, the delivery's got to be on a side loader. And I'm sat there going, I don't know, how does that work? And then I thought about it, they mean a container, it lifts it to the ground and that's all great. And I thought, well, in the UK, they're very rare. That's a real commodity and that's a really expensive job. And I'm sat there thinking, this is my first job in New Zealand. I was rubbing my hands together. Over here, everything moves on a side loader, more or less. Yeah. So, and it's the same if we talk to America. Even last night, I was talking to somebody and they use their own vernacular and they talk about, it's RTM, it's this, it's that, it's whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't translate to something in New Zealand or in the UK. So it's almost like a logistics language barrier. Yeah. You've got to kind of understand.
Well, Americans are famous for making up words, so.
Yes. I saw something the other day and it really amused me, and it was American having to use different words. So they didn't understand what a pavement was, so they had to use sidewalk, so they knew where to walk.
But how has the global freight landscape, changed particularly in the past few years, I suppose, post-COVID and all that? And I suppose, what should New Zealand exporters prepare for this year, or can they prepare?
Look, I think it's kind of a two or maybe even threefold answer. So let's start with the simple answer, which is where are we now and what's happened over the last few years. So what people don't realise is logistically, New Zealand isn't just a long way from kind of anywhere else except Australia. It's like the last bus stop on a route. Yeah. So all the shipping goes around the world, and it all ends and tails in New Zealand, but it goes in one direction. So it makes things. It made things before COVID exceptionally difficult. COVID happened. The ships became more sporadic. The shipping lines were more nervous. The rates were going up drastically. So now rates are now bobbing down again, or they have been for a while, even though the shipping line said they never would. And that's the problem. It's unpredictability. Yeah. It's the fact that a few years ago, everything was nice and stable. You knew there was going to be a boat every week. You knew that it was going to cost you $1,000. You knew it was going to take 30 days. Then we had COVID. Then we had the lack of water in the Panama Canal and the China Sea. You've had Somalian pirates. You've had and all of these little factors are like bumps on the road, and they just destroyed the whole suspension. They just make everything unpredictable. And I'm afraid that and I'm very careful about this, with what POTUS, also I'll call him POTUS, is doing in America, that unpredictability is only going to spike. Yeah. It's only going to spike. And we're navigating very, very tricky waters, I think, for exporters. That being said, not impossible waters. Not shark infested, just tricky, you know? And I don't want people to lose sight of that, because one of the other positives you didn't ask, and I mean, I'm going to edit this out, I suppose, but one of the things which did come about was the entrepreneur. Because of COVID, lots of people said, we've got no money. What do we do? We'll try this. And it's kind of working for them.
Yeah.
And e-commerce is now becoming a bigger thing in New Zealand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, we've had unpredictability. I can't see there being less unpredictability. I can only see rates kind of going up slightly.
In terms of trying to plan for that for a business, what can a business do? What can they sort of put in place to help?
Yeah, I think it's, and I've said this, I think at events I've been to with you, and I've said it, I'll say it to anybody really. It's I've got to make sure I get the amount of P's right. It's a 5 P's. Proper planning prevents poor performance.
Yeah.
Talk to your partners, be it logistics, work out what your player is going to go to, then speak to a logistics person, could be HDL, could be anybody, and say, what can you help us with? What advice can you give? And then we can reach out to numerous partners for you, or, the forwarder should be able to, and to help give it them answers, because it's in our interest to make it work and make it happen. But don't underestimate the cost of logistics.
Yeah.
Don't underplay that, but make sure you lean into the knowledge and advice. Don't be scared to ask a question, because it's a question.
And so do you find that, a lot of people underestimate not necessarily the costs, but the points of contact along the way that they need to account for? Yeah,
I think they do. But again, if you're selling to an overseas, if you've got the right solution in place for going overseas, is work out what their tax laws are.
Yeah.
So look, again, as an example, if you ship to the UK, because I've got a strong link with the UK, the UK's got VAT, which is England's version of GST, right? For those who don't know. You can't claim that back if you're not a registered company there.
Yeah.
So you lose that VAT. So you've got to find someone that you're selling it through.
Yeah.
As a distributor, I suppose, to make sure you can get that back. Because if you underestimate that, then you think, well, I'll get my GST back. Well, you won't get it back if it's in the UK.
Yeah.
But a good freight forwarder can actually help sort some of them problems out as well.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with them correctly.
Yeah.
So to me, it's understand the tax rules, the duty rules, which are now going to be, the implication that's going to be, and make sure that you understand how you're going to do that and what your actual cost is going to be, and where it's going to come from.
Yeah.
One of the things I found with dealing with, and I call them mama and papa companies because they're all small startups and that kind of thing. They developed a real niche little product. Well, I don't know, it might be a bottle cap opener system or something, whatever. Yeah. And they sit there going, well, it's doing really well. We're going to launch it into a different market. Yeah. And then they go, well, we'll start shipping my bottle cap opener from their house. And two things happen. A, they underestimate how much it costs it is to move a bottle cap opener from here to the UK or America or wherever. B, they haven't looked into the implications of what the duty is and that kind of stuff. But lastly, as the business scales up and they outgrow their garage and mama and papa can't keep up with demand because they've done really well, and they go, we'll be making 30% margin. So they hand it off to a 3PL, which is another part of a forwarding company. Yeah. And then all of a sudden their margin goes from 30% to they're losing 10% because they haven't taken into account, well, this is how much it's going to be. You've got to allow for the growth, is what I'm trying to say. Because growth actually, up until a certain point, growth costs you more money before it starts to become a quantity of you start getting reductions because of quantity and scale.
And I suppose on that tech side of things, obviously you gave the UK example I took before around how like the US, 50 states, 50 different taxes, state, federal, that side of things.
Yeah.
And they all seem to be changing as well.
Yes, they do. Look, I think the thing is, as again, and we were speaking about this just before, but if someone said to me, what is the key thing to know? What do you where's it going? Where's it from? Because as a forwarder, we need like 4 pieces of information. Where's it from? Where's it going? How much does it weigh? And how big is it?
Yeah.
And then say to them, give me options.
Yeah.
Don't say, well, I was speaking to such and such. And the way they do it is, that's great. Let your forwarder come up with options and then turn around and say, well, could we do it this way? Because this is how they do it. And let them explain to you why it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
understand your marketplace and understand what you're going to do. Yes, they've got the different states and all that kind of stuff, but if you send it to the right state in the first place, it's not an issue, as opposed to the story I told you a minute ago about somebody sent it to the wrong state, and then you got to get it to another state, and then it's like,
so is there, and again, this is probably going into the plan side of things as well. Are there ways that exporters can look to reduce some of those freight costs and still have kind of stability in terms of what they're doing?
I think,
or is it more the relationship with the freight forwarder?
It's about a relationship with the freight forwarder, and then making sure I always like to say one of the key things, and I'm talking about HGL, I don't mean to be biased, but I am.
Yeah.
I always believe it's about giving options.
Yeah.
Because I don't expect, you shouldn't expect me to know how to make your bottle top opener. And I don't expect you to know the best way of doing shipping.
Yeah.
And if you do, it's like, well, that's not the right way to do it. So try and get the options, try and get the, get the forwarder to give you the ideas and the different details and then constantly question that.
Yeah.
Is that the cheapest way to do it? Is that the best way to do it? What's the advantages of doing it a different way?
Yeah. Yeah. So are there like certain shipping routes or markets where New Zealand exporters have an advantage, and, how can they capitalize on that?
Well, that's actually a very tough question.
Because there are none?
No, I think with the advantage, if we've got an advantage, look, I'll change the nature of the question a little bit. I constantly get surprised by what we import and export from New Zealand and where they make gains. You read something in the papers and you'll think, wow, so they just done this boom thing, which is a new supersonic aeroplane.
Yes.
New Zealand.
Yeah.
It's done here in New Zealand. And it's not, if there's a disadvantage in New Zealand, we don't shout about. They're not a boastful, I can't say word because I'm not Kiwi, but they're not a boastful country.
Yeah.
They're not the kind of people who stand on a hill and say, look at us.
Yeah.
Yet we export the finest grain flour in the world to America, ramen flour to Japan, Hong Kong, because it's the best flour grinding. They import the wheat into New Zealand and then we ship it around the world. That's how good the quality of the flour is. Or, the equipment which we use, or the rock crushers, or, the mining and all that. I didn't realize how much mining was done in New Zealand and how much gold we ship out every week.
Yeah.
Kilos of it.
Yeah.
Which is, so to kind of touch base on what you're saying, it's just an exciting time, I think, to be a Kiwi, because I think the marketplace has really opened up.
Yeah.
You've just got to understand how it works and how you can move it to exciting opportunities, I think, especially in America because of what's going on.
Yeah.
Because we're under the radar. We don't ship anything to America he doesn't like. So he needs that stuff. So at the moment, I think it's just interesting and exciting. I don't think it's so much challenges, so much as do your homework.
Yeah.
Ask everyone the questions you can.
Yeah. So, for a lot of exporters, there is this path a lot of times of like Australia, US, UK, or Australia, UK, US, in terms of where a lot of New Zealand exporters want to be. So with Australia being kind of like that first step for many New Zealand companies, do you come across, I suppose, common kind of missteps with that exporting into the Australian market? Do people underestimate what happens there?
I think the Australia and New Zealand are really unique in how protective they are of their environment and MPI, Ministry of Primary Industries. We have to have special documentation in place to go to Australia and to bring cargo in here.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to let in anything which is going to jeopardize our environment, the local fauna, the indigenous animals and plants and that kind of stuff. Places like the UK and the USA, they can't let anything in. Well, maybe not so much America these days. But yeah, they can't let anything they want in.
Yeah.
Or they're not too bothered about it. We don't have the same strict laws or ruling in place for MPI. It's something you can't underestimate. And it's really not even so much the cargo, so much as the packaging.
Yeah.
So when you're doing your costing and your pricing, make sure you think about the market you're sending it to. This is what I'm trying to get to. The market you're sending it to and how you're packaging it, what you're packaging it on, because you might make 10 cartons, which are great, put them on a non-compliant pallet, and then all of a sudden you get a problem and it gets destroyed in Australia because they won't let the pallet in and it's on the pallet.
Yeah. Yeah.
As an example. So don't underestimate the paperwork, but don't be overawed by the paperwork. Again, your freight forwarder should give you the correct advice and then handle it and take care of it.
Yeah. Just as an example, in terms of when you deal with a business for the first time, what are the steps that you kind of walk them through?
First of all, we want to understand the marketplace and where they're sending it to. So we can try and find out, again, going back to what we were just saying. So you come to me and you'll say, look, I want to send some stuff to America. We'll use America as an example right now.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you want to do? What terms are you going to use? What shipping terms are you going to use? Yeah. What's going to be best for you? And lean into that knowledge from the forwarder. So we'll find out how you want to ship it, what the terms are. We'll look at what the legislation is. We'll have to say, right, here's your price. Yeah. But you need to give me this document, that document, this document, and that document. Yeah. If you can eat it, then it's going to be a lot more documents. If you can't eat it and you're using it, it's going to be less documents, generally speaking. Yeah. But lean into your freight forwarder and say, look, for us, it's always a case of what have you got to move? Where's it going from? Where's it going to? How heavy is it? How big is it? Yeah. We'll come back to you. We'll say, this is a price, but be aware of this. Yeah. Yeah. And then make sure you ask your freight forwarder and your logistics supplier, what does that cover? What do the terms cover? And the terms are something I get really passionately about how it's handled and the fairness of the terms and Incoterms specifically. Okay. Yeah.
So when it comes to, like, we've obviously talked about a little bit about Australia, US, UK. When going into some of the Asian markets and obviously like Southeast Asia or China, what are some of the logistical differences that people can come across going there?
Fewer, to be fair. They're actually easier to trade with as partners than a lot of countries in the world. Transit times are quicker. You don't have... So the way the world moves shipping, for lack of a better word, use the word transshipment, you may hear it if you're speaking to someone. There's no direct leg from Auckland to London for a plane or a boat. Yeah. So invariably it stops off somewhere, exactly like an aeroplane, or, it will stop off at Singapore and then it will load up with more stuff. Going to Southeast Asia and China and that kind of places, there tends to be less transshipments, more direct options, better services. Tougher market to crack though, because their prices are much lower than what you're selling at. Yeah. But again, if you've got the right marketplace and you've got the right whatever, that's great. But again, it comes back to everything. Lean on your freight forwarder to give you the answers. It's not your job to understand logistics. Yeah. Yeah. And don't just go to, I shouldn't say this, but don't just go to one logistics provider. Yeah. Challenge two. Yeah. And see who you feel more comfortable with. Sometimes it's not about the price.
Yeah. And I suppose that kind of goes into, at the end of the day, if the product doesn't get delivered, then, it's all for naught anyway. So when it comes to things like customs and compliance, is that how much of that do you deal with it as opposed to how much does an exporter need to know and deal with themselves?
Technically, the exporter shouldn't, and I say this all the time, they shouldn't need to worry about logistics. If they plan it properly with a correct partner, the logistics partner, that's why we use the word partner. So we're a service industry. Yeah. Offer a service. Yeah. If they're doing their job properly, you shouldn't have to worry too much about that. They should have already pre-asked them questions. Their partner in America should say, hey, we need this, 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 and this. Yeah. And once that's all in place, it should be fine. Yeah. So, you've got to believe in the system, but you've just got to make sure you're up front in the first place. What are you moving and where are you moving it to? Yeah. And then ask the forwarder, what are my implications going to be? Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things which, I'm not sure how it's really tackled within the logistics side of things, but obviously sustainability is a big topic and more companies are reporting on that. How does that conversation kind of work on the logistics side of things and what you do and how you handle that?
There's probably a very, very, very correct, politically correct and great answer for this, and I can't for the life of me think of it because I'm not that politically correct, because we're a freight forwarder. We've got technically nothing.
Yeah.
So we're relying on shipping lines and that kind of stuff. I do think that.
But does that kind of come into, here are the options if this is a concern for you?
You can choose. You can choose your partner based on carbon neutrality.
Yeah.
It just depends on how they report back their carbon neutrality, if it's completely and upfront and whatever. I don't think it affects shipping as such. You can ask about it, but I think you've just kind of got to accept the fact that at some point or another, there's going to be a dirty, great big diesel powered boat.
Yes.
Unless it's hydrogen now, which I think Maersk have got a couple of hydrogen boats. It is what it is. You just got to kind of accept that it's probably still one of the lowest emission ways of moving stuff in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're moving tens of thousands of tons in one go. And although you're burning a lot of diesel or fuel to get it to move, actually, in comparison to how many bits and pieces are on that boat, it becomes very marginal.
So on that side of things as well, not necessarily to do with sustainability, but are there any kind of emerging logistics technologies or things like that which could be of interest to exporters, or it's more what you do in the background?
I think it's kind of what we do in the background a little bit. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to move something on a boat, you're going to move something on a plane, you're going to move something on a truck. Electric trucks are becoming more, more of a commonplace thing. And looking at the last mile, I think if you want to contain your carbon footprint, really, you look at sustainability and what's best for your business.
Yeah.
Try and look at the forecast of where you think you're going to sell stuff and try and make your stuff as central to that as you can.
Yeah.
Whilst making sure you look at where it's going to be sold. I had this conversation very recently. They've opened up an inland port in Hamilton.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And they're talking about the sustainability of it and the carbon neutralness and et cetera, and all that. And I went, and they're basing in Hamilton. Yeah. I said, but most of the stuff is sold in Auckland. Have you taken into consideration the moving of the cargo from Hamilton to Auckland?
Yeah.
The cost of that, credentials of it in regards to the environment and everything else. And the answer was no. Well, we've done what we needed to do, so we're okay. Well, yeah, but you've only done half the equation.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes to the whole heart of what this conversation is about. They've only looked at their half of the problem and they've patted themselves on the back. They haven't actually looked at what the customer needs.
Yeah.
What's the actual goal here? You know? So, yeah.
that sounds like a whole topic in itself.
It really is. Don't get me started. Yeah. I'm not allowed to rant. I've been told off already today.
Okay. Well, I know that we've kind of covered this off before, but I think it's just going back to the whole thing of like, if a company is completely new to exporting, they haven't done it before, what are the most important logistical factors that they need to be aware of and address before sending their first shipment?
The very first thing I think somebody in shipping or somebody wants to start exporting this to be aware of is what is their product? What is it actually? And when I say what is their product, what is it made of? What's it consist of? And what's it going to be sold as?
Yeah.
Try and get what's called the harmonized tariff code.
Okay.
Because that really plays into the relevancy in regards to what countries require documentation wise.
Okay.
So if you can try and work out what the harmonization code is, then you can start thinking, okay, well, what country it's going to go to because that code is global. And then it gives you the opportunity to then say, okay, well, we're going to be shipping this product with this HS code, which you can ask a freight forwarder for, right? Yep. You should be able to ask our AI bot soon. If you ask them questions and you know what the HS code is, then when they're doing their quotation or they're doing their things to turn and say to them, can you just look into what the implications are shipping wise? Because once it's imported into the country, it becomes less of an issue. Unless it's food and drink, in which case you've got a whole other thing to deal with, which isn't a freight forwarder's problem. Although they should still be able to offer you advice. Know what your product is, know where it's coming from exactly, and know where it's going to exactly. Yeah. You know? So they're the things. Yeah. Understand what you're selling. Yeah. And then you'll be able to understand what that means in the different marketplaces you're selling it.
Aside from everything that you've just said, what would be the single biggest advice that you would give to anybody when it comes to the logistics side of it? in entering into.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Don't get hung up on the details. And
so question.
Yeah, absolutely. Question. I mean, we all shop, but, you know, we all compare pick and pack to New World to Woolworths, isn't it now? To Woolworths. All right. Yep. And it's the same with freight forwarding. Look at the options. And I shouldn't say it because it goes against, you know, you just come to us, but go to a freight forwarder and then don't just consider, well, they were cheaper. How did you feel? How was the service you got from them? How comfortable were you with that company? Yeah. And then the other thing is know how you're going to sell it, because know the terms, understand Incoterms. And again, ask us, look it up. It's probably the two most important things. Understand and know your products, what the HS code is.
Yeah.
And then nail that.
Yeah.
And then don't be afraid to ship.
Yeah. So I suppose one of the other things which must come out of it, though, is just trying to give people peace of mind. And if you can get that peace of mind over the logistics side of things and what's happening.
It's all about relationships.
Yeah.
Again, we are, for lack of a better word, very bad waiters as freight forwarders. We move your food or your stuff from here to there. And if we do a good enough job and we get paid, you know, you kind of get that, not a tip, but you know what I mean? You kind of get the mental tip. And this goes back to what I said a second ago. Get 2 or 3 quotes, but don't base it purely on price. Base it on how you feel about that company, what you know about them, look into them a little bit. You know, smaller companies can be more effective than large companies sometimes because they've got they're more desperate to do the work. Yeah. No, they, you know, because sometimes they've got much bigger and better options because they're independent. They can use anyone they want to move something. Just don't be afraid of it. Concentrate yourself on your sales and how you're going to improve that.
Yeah. Excellent. So, what's on the horizon for HGL this year? If you can predict it.
Can you predict anything? We're doing really well, actually. We're touch wood. We're up. So for us, it's about a little bit of continued growth, and trying to make the right steps, because I think it's going to be a really tough market this year. I think everyone's worried, and there's a lack of confidence, and everyone's worried about trade wars.
Yeah.
So for HGL, a little bit more growth, I think, continuing on the path we have done, which is smaller amounts of work but higher levels of service. I genuinely believe that's still the way forward. And then really kind of consolidating our position in the marketplace to make another big growth next year. So we'll see.
Excellent. Well, thanks for coming in.